Book of Heaven, Volume 11, Part 9. March 17th, 1914. The one who does the divine will takes part not only in the external works, ad extra, of God, but also in the interior actions, ad intra, of the divine persons. Continuing in my usual state, my lovable Jesus kept making himself seen inside my whole being, in such a way that I possessed all of his members. He looked so content that, appearing unable to contain this contentment, he told me, "My daughter, the one who does my will takes part in the actions, ad intra, of the divine persons. Only for the one who does my volition is this privilege reserved, to take part not only in all of our works ad extra, but to pass from these to the works ad intra. This is why it is hard for me not to content the one who lives of my will, because, since this soul is in my will, she is present in the intimate place of our heart, of our desires, of our affections and thoughts. Her heartbeat, her breath, and ours are one. Therefore the contentments, the delights, the glory, the love that she gives us, all of them infinite in their way and nature, in nothing dissimilar to ours, are such and so many, that just as in our eternal love one enraptures the other, one forms the contentment of the other, to the point that many times, unable to contain this love and these contentments, we go out with works ad extra. In the same way, we remain enraptured and delighted by this soul who does our will. Therefore, how could we render discontent the one who makes us so content? How not to love just as we love ourselves, not as we love the other creatures, the one who loves us with our same love? There are no curtains of secrets between this soul and us. There is no ours and yours, but everything is in common. And what we are by nature, impeccable, holy, we render the soul by grace, so that no disparity may exist between her and us. And just as, unable to contain our love, we go out with works ad extra, in the same way, unable to contain the love of the one who does our will, we let her out of ourselves, and we point her out to the peoples as our favorite one, our beloved, and that it is only for her and for souls similar to her that we let goods descend upon earth, and that only for love of these souls do we preserve the earth. And then we enclose her within ourselves to enjoy her, because just as we, divine persons, are inseparable, so does the soul who does our will become inseparable from us. March 19th, 1914. The soul who diffuses herself in the divine will forms the jewel and the amusement of the three divine persons. It seems that blessed Jesus wants to speak about his most holy will. I was diffusing myself in his whole interior, in his thoughts, desires, affections, in his will, in his love, in everything. And Jesus, with infinite sweetness, told me, "Oh, if you knew the contentment that the one who does my will gives me, your heart would break with joy. See, as you were diffusing yourself in my thoughts, desires, and so forth, you formed the amusement of my thoughts, and my desires, fusing in yours, played together with them, your affections, united to your will and to your love, running and flying into my affections, into my will and love, kissed one another, and pouring like a rapid stream into the immense sea of the Eternal One, they amused themselves with the divine persons, now with the Father, now with me, now with the Holy Spirit. Then, wanting to give no time to one another, we all play with her, the three of us together, and we make of her our jewel. And this jewel is so dear to us that since it must form our amusement, we keep it jealously ad intra, in the intimate part of our will. And when the creatures embitter us and offend us, in order to be cheered, we take our jewel, and we amuse ourselves together. March 21st, 1914. The irresistible need of Jesus to make known to the soul how he loves her and all the gifts with which he keeps filling her. Jesus continues, "My daughter, I love the one who does my will so much that I cannot manifest to her everything, or everything at once, of how much I love her, the grace with which I keep enriching her, the beauty with which I keep embellishing her, and all the goods with which I keep filling her. If I manifested to her everything together, the soul would die of joy. Her heart would burst in such a way that she could no longer live on earth, but in a flash would take flight toward heaven. However, I feel an irresistible need to make myself known, as well as the love I have for her. It is too hard to love, to do good, without making oneself known. I feel my heart as though crack, and unable to resist so much love, I keep manifesting to her, little by little, how I love her, and all the gifts with which I keep filling her. And when the soul feels filled to the brim, to the point of no longer being able to contain them, in one of these manifestations of mine, she shall disappear from the earth, and shall emerge within the bosom of the Eternal One. And I, Jesus, my life, it seems to me that you exaggerate a little bit in manifesting to me where a soul who does your will can reach. And Jesus, compassionating my ignorance, smiling, told me, "No, no, my beloved, I do not exaggerate. One who exaggerates seems to want to deceive, but your Jesus knows not how to deceive you. On the contrary, what I have told you is nothing. You shall receive more surprises when, once the prison of your body is broken, and you are swimming inside my bosom, the point that my will made you reach shall be openly revealed to you." March 24th, 1914. The humanity of Jesus has its limits, while his will is eternal and without limits. The soul who lives in the divine will makes up for the humanity of Jesus, and is used by him as his humanity. Continuing in my usual state, I was lamenting to Jesus, for he had not yet come. And he, on coming, told me, "My daughter, my will hides my very humanity within itself. This is why, in speaking to you about my will, sometimes I hide my humanity from you. You feel surrounded with light. You hear my voice, but cannot see me, because my will absorbs my humanity within itself, since my humanity has its limits, while my will is eternal and without limits. In fact, when my humanity was on earth, it did not cover all places, all times, and all circumstances. And where it could not reach, my endless will made up for it and did reach. So when I find souls who live completely of my will, they make up for my humanity, for the times, for the places, for the circumstances, and even for the sufferings, because since my will lives in them, I use them just as I used my humanity. What was my humanity if not the organ of my will? Such are those who do my will. April 5th, 1914. Everything that is done in the divine will becomes light. Continuing in my usual state, my adorable Jesus made himself seen within an immensity of light. I was swimming in this light, and so I could feel it flow in my ears, in my eyes, in my mouth, in everything. And Jesus told me, "My daughter, for the one who does my will, if she works, her work becomes light. If she speaks, if she thinks, if she desires, if she walks, and so forth, her words, thoughts, desires, and steps turn all into light, but light drawn from my sun. My will draws the one who does my volition with such strength as to make her spin continuously around this light. And as she spins, she takes more light that keeps her as though captured within me." April 10th, 1914. Meaning of the tearing off of the crown of thorns from the head of Jesus. The center of Jesus on earth is the soul who does his divine will. Love needs the divine will to be at rest. This morning, my always lovable Jesus came as crucified and shared his pains with me. He drew me so much to himself, into the sea of his passion, that I could almost follow it step by step. But who can say all that I could comprehend? There are so many things that I don't know where to begin. I shall only say that in seeing the crown of thorns being torn off of him, since the thorns were keeping the blood from coming all out, as the crown of thorns was torn off, that blood poured outside through those little holes, flowing over his face, over his hair, in large rivulets, and descending over the whole person of Jesus. And Jesus, "Daughter, these thorns that prick my head shall prick the pride, the conceit, the most hidden wounds of man, so as to make the pus that they contain come out. And the thorns dipped in my blood shall heal him, and shall return to him the crown that sin had taken away from him." Then Jesus made me pass to other steps of the Passion, but I felt my heart being pierced in seeing him suffer so much. And he, almost to cheer me again, began to speak about his holy will again. "My daughter, my center on earth is the soul who does my will. See, the sun spreads its light everywhere on earth, but it keeps its own center. In heaven, I am the life of each blessed, but I still have my center, my throne. In the same way, I am everywhere on earth, but my center, the place in which I raise my throne in order to reign, my charisms, my satisfactions, my triumphs, my very palpitating heart, the whole of myself, is found in the soul who does my most holy will, as though in its own center. This soul is so identified with me that she becomes inseparable from me, and all my wisdom and power cannot find the means to detach from her in the slightest. Then he added, love has its anxieties, desires, ardors, and restlessness. My will, instead, is perpetual rest. And do you know why? Because love contains the beginning, the means, and the end of a work. Therefore, anxieties and restlessness arise in order to reach the end. And much of what is human and imperfect mixes with them. And if my will and love are not united together at each step, poor love, how dishonored it remains, even in the greatest and holiest works. On the other hand, my will operates in a simple act, as the soul leaves the whole attitude of the work to my will. And while my will operates, the soul rests. Therefore, since it is not the soul that operates, but my will in her, there are no anxieties or restlessness, and her works are free of any imperfection. May 18th, 1914. Peaceful souls are the staffs of God. As I was feeling oppressed, I was almost about to be surprised by the poisonous waves of disturbance. My lovable Jesus, my faithful sentry, immediately ran to prevent disturbance from entering into me, and scolding me, told me, "Daughter, what are you doing? The love and the interest I have to maintain the soul at peace are such and so great that I am forced to make miracles in order to keep the soul at peace. And those who disturb these souls would want to confront me and prevent this miracle of mine, all of love. So I recommend to you, be balanced in everything. My being is in full balance in everything, and yet I do see and feel evils, and bitternesses I do not lack. Nevertheless, I never become unbalanced. My peace is perennial. My thoughts are peaceful. My words are honeyed with peace. The beating of my heart is never tumultuous, even in the midst of immense joys or interminable bitternesses. The very operating of my hands in the act of scourging flows over the earth as enveloped in waves of peace. So if you do not maintain yourself at peace, since I am in your heart, I feel dishonored, and my way and yours are no longer in accord. I would feel hindered in you from carrying out my ways in you, and therefore you would render me unhappy. Only peaceful souls are my staffs on which I lean, and when the many iniquities snatch scourges from my hands, by leaning on these staffs, I always do less than what I should do. Ah, if, may it never be, I lacked these staffs. In lacking my supports, I would send everything to ruin. June 29th, 1914. How the creature who lives in the divine will takes part in the actions ad intra of the divine persons. as some authoritative people read what is written on March 17th, that the one who does the will of God takes part in the actions ad intra of the divine persons, etc., they said that it was not like that, and that the creature does not enter into this. I was left pensive, though calm and convinced that Jesus would make the truth known. Then, finding myself in my usual state, I saw an interminable sea before my mind, and many objects inside this sea. Some of them were small, some bigger. Some remained on the surface of the sea and were simply wet. Others went down to the bottom, becoming soaked with water inside and out. Others then went down so deep as to become dissolved inside the sea. Now, while I was seeing this, my always lovable Jesus came and told me, "My beloved daughter, did you see that? The sea symbolizes my immensity, while the objects, different in size, the souls who live in my will. The different ways of being, some on the surface, some down, some dissolved within me, vary according to how they live in my volition, some in an imperfect way, some in a more perfect way, and others reaching the point of dissolving completely in my will. Now, my daughter, my ad intra about which I spoke to you is precisely this. Sometimes I keep you together with me, with my humanity, and you take part in my pains, in the works and in the joys of my humanity. Some other times, drawing you inside of me, I make you to be dissolved within my divinity. How many times have I not made you swim within me, keeping you so deep inside of me that you could see nothing but me, inside and outside of yourself? Now, as I kept you within me, you took part in the enjoyments, in the love, and in all the rest, always according to your little capacity. And even though our works ad intra are eternal, the creatures can still enjoy the effects of those works in their lives according to their love. Now, when the will of the soul is one with mine, and I place her inside of me, and she renders herself indissoluble, always as long as she does not move from my will, what is the wonder if I said that she takes part in the works ad intra? Besides, from the way it is explained further down, if they wanted to know the truth, they could have known very well the meaning of my ad intra, because the truth is light to the mind, and with light things can be seen as they are. But if one does not want to know the truth, the mind is blind, and things cannot be seen as they are. And so they raise doubts and difficulties, remaining more blind than before. Besides, my being is always in act. It has no beginning and no end. I am old and new. Therefore, our works ad intra have always been, are, and shall be, and always in act. So, through the intimate union with our will, the soul is already within us, and therefore she admires, she contemplates, she loves, she enjoys, she takes part in our love, in our enjoyments, and in everything else. Why then was it inappropriate for me to say that the one who does my will takes part in the actions ad intra. While Jesus was saying this, a simile came to my mind. A man marries a woman. The two have children, and are so rich, virtuous, and good, as to make whomever might live with them happy. Now, if someone touched by the goodness of this couple wants to live together with them, does he not come to partake in their riches and in their happiness? And by living together with them, does he not feel himself being infused with their virtues? If this can be done humanly, how much more with our lovable Jesus? August 15th, 1914. Fusing oneself in Jesus in order to relieve him from the pains caused by creatures. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus came in a different way from the usual one that he has had with me during this period of my life. That if he comes at all, it is just for a little, in passing, flashing by, and with almost total cessation of the sufferings that he used to communicate to me upon coming. His holy will alone is what makes up for everything in me. So, this morning, he came and stayed for several hours, but in a state that would make the stones cry. He had pain everywhere, and wanted to be relieved in each part of his most holy humanity. It seemed that if this were not done, he would reduce the world to a heap of rubble. It seemed that he did not want to go, so as not to see the slaughters and the grave sights of the world that almost forced him to do worse things. So I clasped him to myself, and wanting to relieve him, I fused myself in his intelligence, so as to be present in all the intellects of creatures, and therefore give my good thought for each evil thought, in order to repair and relieve all the offended thoughts of Jesus. In the same way, I fused myself in his desires, so as to be present in all the evil desires of creatures, in order to place my good desire and relieve the offended desires of Jesus. And so with all the rest. Then, after I relieved him part by part, as though cheered, he left. September 25th, 1914. Effects of the prayers done in the divine will. I was offering my poor prayers to Blessed Jesus, and I was thinking to myself to whom it would be better for Blessed Jesus to apply them. And he benignly said to me, "My daughter, the prayers done with me and with my very will can be given to all, without excluding anyone. All receive their part and their effects, as if those prayers had been offered for one alone. However, they operate according to the dispositions of the creatures, just like communion, or my passion. I give it to all and to each one, but the effects are produced according to their dispositions. And if 10 people receive it, the fruit is not inferior to the case in that 5 had received it. Such is the prayer done together with me and from my will." You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 11, Part 9. Fiat.